Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. So if you're listening on iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. Got a lot of exciting stand-up dates to announce. This Saturday, I'll be in Morris Plains, New Jersey, headlining the Tiff's Ale House, aka the Dojo of Comedy. That'll be this Saturday, May 14th, with my buddies Amanda Gale and Gina Hyena. Then I'm heading next weekend to the Orlando MegaCon. We'll be doing a live SimpCast panel with Brittany Venti and Anna, that Star Wars girl. That'll be Saturday, May 21st at 6 o'clock at the MegaCon convention. Then I'm heading to St. Louis Wednesday, May 25th. I'll be headlining the Helium Comedy Club out there, then heading to Illinois to headline the Vixen on Friday, May 27th. I will be joined by Crip Daddy, who is hilarious, and I think a lot of my listeners are fans of his as well, so that'll be good. Then I'm heading to Chicago on Saturday, May 28th to do 2 SimpCast live panel shows, 7:30 and 10 o'clock. That'll be with Brittany Venti and special guests to be announced. Then I'll be headlining in Buffalo. This date was just added. I'll be headlining at Nickel City Cigars in Buffalo, New York. I'm going to bring up their website really quickly because what's good about these tickets, the price to this show also includes premium cigar and 24-hour private club membership to their Nickel City Cigar Club. Sounds very cool, very manly. I'm very excited to do it. And if you go to nickelcitycigars.com and use promo code CMP, you get 15% off their entire website. So even if you can't make it to the show, you can still check out their stuff. Then after this show in July, I'll be heading to Austin on September 8th to do the Cap City Comedy Club, and then to Philly for September 14th. I'll be headlining at the Helium Club out there in Philly. Yes, very excited. Would love to see you guys at a show. But quickly, a word from our sponsor. Wow, look, I'm doing this all by myself. I'm queuing up the music. Yeah. No, I don't like that music. I like this music. Ooh. Guys, we've all seen so many people making ridiculous money from crypto. But did you know that it's easy for you to do the same? The Copy My Crypto membership site shows you the exact cryptos that YouTuber James McMahon personally holds and allows you to copy him. It's like having a big brother who knows what he's doing. You don't have to know a thing about crypto or investing or finance or any of that. You just simply do what he does. I'll tell you guys a little bit more about James. He runs the Crypto with James YouTube channel, which despite heavy membership has over 15,000 subscribers and 1 million views. Since March of 2020, he's told his viewers to buy 26 crypto coins. Had you put $100 into each one, you'd have over 66K right now. Of these 26 coins, his top pick of the year, a coin called Phantom, is currently up around 440 times from when he started. That one call alone has retired a number of people, including guys and girls as young in their 20s and 30s. This is crazy. This is all public knowledge too. You can go to YouTube and verify this for yourself. So if this sounds good to you and you'd like to join the 1,300 members who copy James and stop what you're doing and head over to copymycrypto.com/Mayr, that's spelled Mayr, you'll not only find proof of everything I've said, but my listeners get full access for just $1. You won't find this offer anywhere else. Act quickly. That's copymycrypto.com/Mayr. Don't take this offer lightly. He's the real deal. Yeah. I like that. Oops. Not so subtle. Okay. You know who else is the real deal? Our next guest. Very excited to have him here. He is a former first-round NBA draft pick, used to play with the Houston Rockets. Now he is working to dethrone Ilhan Omar. He is running against her in Minnesota for Congress. So excited to have him here today. Royce White, hello and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I also love that your setup could also be a passport photo or a driver's license.
We're in the works of getting a podcast studio set up for myself. So
you are. That's so exciting. This
I'm
is
excited.
good, Royce, because you have a lot to say. You definitely have a message, and like no matter how the election goes, I think you should, still continue on. Although if you are in Congress, would they let you have a podcast or probably not?
It'd be the least corrupt thing on the menu item on the menu list, I think, for me to have a podcast. So we'll fight them if they don't.
Okay, good. How did you go from being a professional athlete to kind of I even hate the word activist because I feel like the lefties have sort of like taken it over and ruined it. Um, but what made you want to start speaking out and using your platform to let people know? I mean, and I just want to know like how you kind of what ignited the fire? What made you want to start speaking out?
Well, my story began with me being drafted into the NBA at a time when mental health as a topic wasn't discussed, and I was one of the first players, one of the first athletes, or one of the first public figures to really talk openly about my struggles with anxiety as a teenager and leading up to me being drafted in the NBA. And I took the NBA to the mat in terms of asking that they create some type of concrete mental health policy that at the time didn't exist in their collective bargaining agreement. In fact, there wasn't a single mention in the collective bargaining agreement about mental health whatsoever.
Nothing at all. That's shocking to me because mental health, it feels like this is the best time to talk about mental health is like in the 2020s. I feel like we almost talk about it too much. So that's shocking to hear that they
Well,
didn't have anything.
this was back in 2012.
Okay.
So this has been a 10-year journey for me to fight the establishment. And at the time, I didn't really realize um, I didn't realize the implications of the NBA as a corporation. I had the intuition that something was very wrong in not having a mental health policy in the NBA, especially if you look at the collective bargaining agreement. It's very detailed. I mean, the detail goes down to the color of a player's socks and the repercussions for not wearing the proper color socks with the proper color code uniform.
Oh,
So, I
wow.
mean, there's a very thorough layout of our collective bargaining agreement. And to not have mental health in there was just a huge red flag to me, not only because I dealt with the issue personally, but because it was just a huge gaping hole around health in general. And yeah, I fought the NBA on that. And as I went through that fight, I started to understand that this wasn't just an NBA issue. This was a global corporate community issue. So
You talk a lot about, or it seems like you're very passionate about like really the concerns, and you're very outspoken about globalism. I feel like a lot of people tiptoe around the word generally, and just the effect that just the fact that corporations own our elected officials. I think that's one of the main reasons that you're running. As much as you can say, like, how much of that did you notice in the NBA? Do you feel like the NBA is like, who are they sort of owned by?
yeah, I mean, the NBA is the coup de grace of globalist institutions. Yeah, back during the Yao Ming era, Daryl Morey, who was actually the former GM of the Houston Rockets, the team I was drafted to, their organization, and some others around the NBA community, such as David Stern, who is now since passed, had this idea that to break into China as a market would expand the NBA's profit margins and everything else beyond belief. And the 90s, late 90s is 20 years after Kissinger and Nixon opened up China to begin with. So people have to understand the scope of time around these issues, and that it was just around the corner that the NBA took its lead from the rest of a globalist corporate community. And so the wheels were turning, and now we can see that the CCP really owns the NBA in many respects. And yeah, I mean, but besides their traitorous allegiance to the CCP, they are a chameleonic organization. They believe in themselves, number one, but they also believe in the consolidation of corporate power, and they believe in using that corporate power in a cartel-like manner where they keep other competition out, stifled. They use drafts in order to constrain the flow of acquiring new players, talent, and all of it. It's a cartel, And it operates much like central banks. It operates much like the media industrial complex. In fact, I would say professional sports is the media industrial complex, but the military, a bunch of other institutions that have become globalists in spirit.
I should have shown this first, and it's your website with your this is so cool. Like, you wrote the United States of the Federal Reserve on your head. This was for a game? I mean, I'm imagining it's for a game because you're sweaty. When was this?
This was at our last Big Three season, and the Big Three is a 3-on-3 professional league that Ice Cube recently started. We're only in our 4th season coming up here in June, and it will be restarting in June, and it'll be on CBS every weekend. People can check that out on Saturday mornings and afternoons. But yeah, this was our last season. So last summer, this picture was taken.
Wow. And what was the response to this? And you've also written "Free the Uyghurs" on your head. Like, these are spicy takes. These are what was the I guess the backlash or the response to you, writing this kind of stuff on your head during games?
Number one, I have great support in our league when it comes to free speech. And I think for that reason, everybody should go and follow the Big Three and continue to tune in over the summer. And as that league tries to grow and expand into the professional sports market, they've been supportive of everything that I've decided to say. One, because they actually believe in free speech as a league, but two, the things I'm saying aren't really controversial, or they're not really debatable. And this statement here about the United States being at the behest of the Federal Reserve isn't really debatable to those who know. And the Uyghur genocide, or the enslavement or internment of an ethnic minority using AI software, facial recognition, to prosecute those encampments, is not really up for debate either. These are just issues that most people won't speak about, which is kind of why I got into politics.
Wow, it's really awesome. I mean, even though it seems like common sense ideas, I think it's super brave. And I loved this video, so I'm just gonna play it for those of you who have not seen it.
There's very few brave souls that step up and say, hey, this is not right. One guy that's done that in professional basketball is Royce White.
Could you imagine if LeBron James had Royce White's balls and intellect?
10 years ago, I took on the NBA and the establishment.
You're a patriot and American hero, and I think they're great, great days ahead of you.
I said that mental health was one of the greatest issues we face.
He's got an anxiety disorder, and he's been really upfront about it. He's actually been an inspiration to a lot of people.
And I was willing to give up my dream to fight for people I had never met.
Did y'all just hear Royce White? I'm fighting back tears right now.
I took the lead when others wouldn't.
Okay, that's your shirt? What does it mean?
Free the Uyghurs, 2 million ethnic minorities in East Turkestan, China, in concentration camps. Something we got to talk about. You know I'm always going to talk about the real things.
Okay.
Free the Uyghurs.
My name is Royce White. I'm a 5th-generation Minnesotan and a product of the Twin Cities. But first and foremost, I'm an American. I'm running for Congress because our leaders have sold us out. We have to fight for freedom. We have to protect our communities. We have to restore what it means to be an American citizen. We have to fight the momentum of globalism. My problem with Ilhan isn't that she's not an American or that she's not from Minnesota. She's in on it. She's a globalist.
We need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
She's a puppet for the establishment. I'm here to sound the alarm. We are in a crisis. We are at war. Our sovereignty is on the line. The soul of America is on the line. What Big Pharma, Big Tech, and the corporate elites have done to us during this pandemic shows us tyranny is here. The line has been drawn, and it's pretty damn clear. We, the people, no longer have a choice. I need you to get involved at roycewhite.us. Godspeed.
Woo! This video gives me chills.
Thank you.
It's powerful stuff, man. And I like that you call out Ilhan Omar. I think you recently wasn't she the one that she had a problem with a bunch of Christians like singing on a plane? It was like it was on the day of Easter, right? And they were singing like,
Yeah, it was Easter weekend, and I guess
yeah.
some people had broken out into song on a flight, and she made the comment, what would happen, or maybe the next time I'm on a plane with my family, we should break out into prayer. I wonder how that would end. Basically playing on the cultural narrative around 9/11 and Islamic extremists and terrorism and the whole deal. So.
Yeah, she definitely set herself up for a lot of 9/11 jokes.
Well, I mean, I think, the biggest thing about Ilhan and that comment is she's already been greatly insensitive to the 9/11 tragedy. I think she's the one who famously said some people did something on that day, and it's just completely inappropriate and insensitive to the great tragedy and tragic loss that happened on that day for the people, but for the nation as a whole. So, I mean, it's just a really strange thing for her to say and try and incite, undermining emotion in that moment. Weird.
Yeah, I think she's gonna forever be known for some people did some things. It's gonna be pretty hard to come back from that. And I thought the craziest thing about her was gonna be that she married her brother so that he could be a U.S. citizen or stay in the country. That's a
Well,
big thing.
the most alarming thing to me about the some people did something is, we got to ask ourselves, who did we leave behind in Afghanistan? When we just left Afghanistan recently, who did we leave behind? We left behind people on the ground in Afghanistan who have aided the national security state for 20 years, right? And some of those people didn't get out, but the same was the case in Somalia when we left Somalia. And we have to ask ourselves who got out of Somalia. A lot of the people who got out of Somalia were national security state assets. And Ilhan's father may have been one, and as such, Ilhan may be one. So when she says some people did some things, it's like, who does she think she's fooling? I mean, anybody who really knows about these issues understands that the terrorist cells that were involved with 9/11 were at one point sponsored by the United States government in some respect. I mean, Bin Laden, the Taliban, the Kurds, and that entire conflict in the Middle East has been misrepresented in the mainstream media. And so if she wanted to say something potent, she should have said something like, what involvement did America have in 9/11? That's an entirely different statement than to say, oh, well, some people did something. It's like, no, probably the same people who you're associated with behind the scenes in the shadow government are the ones who carried that mission out. And so, it's just a double cross and triple cross of cultural narrative that if you don't pay attention, it's easy to get caught up in one way or another.
What do you think are the biggest challenges heading into this? I know the area that you're running for Congress in is pretty Democratic. What do you think are the biggest challenges?
I would say in mainstream media indoctrination of all of the issues. I think there's we're standing on an active volcano, and there's a crisis of leadership, and there's a failure of logic. The only way for us to climb out, to get out safely, is to restore our national honor and our sacred honor. And I think the parameters around what national honor and sacred honor are is already a shit show. But let's take the issue Roe v. Wade, for example. In America, we like to play this game in public, in the mainstream, about human rights and civil rights. And it's just wild to me how far we've gotten, how far off of logic we've strayed. And human rights, any precept of human rights and civil rights has to begin with the sanctity of life. And the Democrats, for example, have waged a 160-year war on the sanctity of life. I mean, this stems back to slavery and the Democrats fighting to retain the right to own slaves. And right up into this day. Back then, they said Black people are subhuman in pursuit of an international slave trade, which was a globalist ambition, by the way. People forget that the first slave trade was actually Globalism 101, all the way until now, where they say a human fetus isn't a child, and it's part of a new globalist transhuman movement. And don't tell me the party switched. And this is what I mean about mainstream cultural narratives that I'm in an uphill battle against. Don't tell me the party switched. In the 1960s, the Democrats jumped on board with the Civil Rights Act as a bait and switch for Black people to vote Democrat. And Lyndon B. Johnson is as racist a person as you could possibly imagine, and that's not abnormal throughout the Democrat Party's history. And if you look a little bit ahead of that, when Roe v. Wade was passed, we had LBJ, then we had Nixon, and Nixon was a Democrat. I mean, he ran as a conservative and he ran as a Republican, but the reality is he was a Democrat, and him and Kissinger were uniparty globalists. And so where exactly is the conservative betrayal of Black people? You know what I mean? And these are the cultural narratives that people haven't really paid close attention to, and the mainstream media has fed us a cookie cutter model of how we should view the political landscape.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy going on, and I just think if we're going to talk about the issue of Black Lives Matter, but we're going to at the same time ignore like abortion rates and where Planned Parenthoods are located, and like the actual hard stats on who is kind of, not being pressured into getting abortions, but like heavily encouraged. And there are kind of rewards given by the state to be a single mom. I think that it's almost glamorized sometimes in the media. And I just feel like the overall goal is, dissolving the family so that the government can be your daddy. And it just seems like a big trick. And as someone who has had to like sort of wade through my own brainwashing, like through college, like I was a total feminist, hated men. And that was back in like the early 2000s, I feel like, before things got even worse.
Yeah.
So it seems daunting when you feel like there are whole communities of folks who seem brainwashed, and it's hard to know where to begin. But I guess we start that by just trying to make change in our local communities. So what is the process like when I guess what is the timeline like for your run?
Well, we have a primary in August, early August, the 9th, and that'll be the GOP primary, and then our election is in November. So we have a late primary as far as standards go around the country, which is a good thing. It's fine by me. Actually, systemically, it's meant to try and protect the incumbent as much as possible, because you spend fighting a primary and then you only have a few months to turn around and focus your energy on the general election. I think I come into this campaign and election cycle with a public profile that will kind of transcend that mechanism. But I'm excited. I mean, I think the primary is going to be a real referendum on Republicans here in Minnesota. I'm going against another uniparty globalist candidate in Cicely Davis. And, just for example, the Republicans are not innocent. And one of the main cultural narratives that has been promoted the most is that Republicans and Donald Trump are synonymous, right? Or that the Republican Party is racist, or that the Republican Party is a hegemony. It's like, absolutely not. The America First MAGA Trump movement is in direct conflict, open warfare with the Republican establishment. And they couldn't be more different in their ideological principles. And I am an America First candidate. And I am in open warfare here at home with the Minnesota Republican Party. And my opponent, who got the GOP endorsement by way of like a 60-40 vote, stood right up in front of a convention and said, God, globalism, abortion, the Church of LGBTQ, and the national debt are all red meat politics. That they're all red meat for the Republican base or the MAGA base, and that there's no way we could win Democrat strongholds by talking about those issues. And this is the real sin of the Republican uniparty, who's been in on it with the Democrats, and that's how this country has gotten this way. So
I agree with you. I think Donald Trump made a huge impact. He kind of reflected the populace, like the average person. Um, yeah, and I think that's kind of weaved in with America First and MAGA, like whatever you want to call it. And then I just feel like the left did such a good job of weaving in like the far right with MAGA. And now we have like ultra MAGA or ultra MAGA. And it's a lot to try to for the average person to try to like weave through all of this. Like even the Washington Post called you a far right darling, and you're just trying to promote regular common sense ideas. Like, yeah, let's put our own country first. What is so crazy about that?
Well, I think I can make it a little easy for people to understand. You got neoliberals and neocons. This is the Republican and the Democrat establishment politicians who form the uniparty, and they're the centrists. They're the chameleonic MBA-like institution that has told people whatever they wanted to hear to raise money, retain their office, and continue on with things as they were, the status quo. The centrists are the purveyors of the status quo. The far right, I mean, who even knows who's the far right anymore? David Duke might be a CIA spook. I mean, let's just be real. These far right, ultra extremist racists who are openly, get all Black and Latino people out of the country. That does not represent the Republican or conservative base in America whatsoever. And then you got the far left, and increasingly the far left is growing. And it's coming back towards the center, and it's pulling the center over to the far left. And so now I think in the country, you have two distinct groups of people. You have a nationalist populist movement, and you have a socialist populist movement. And the Bernie Sanders, the Squad, and the far left progressives are that socialist populist movement. And your America First candidates on the conservative side of the nationalist populist movement. And the difference is very clear. The difference is that the America First candidates believe in America's founding values, which are Christian values, and the socialist populist movement believes that you need to either get rid of your dog or eat soy in order to save the earth. Right? I mean, this is they're a climate cult, and they're bound together by these ideas such as climate change. Gender fluidity, feminism, radical feminism, racism, but really it's just race baiting in most respects. But that's kind of the nexus of coalition over on the socialist populist side.
Yeah, it's hard to listen like to anytime you have someone like Bill Gates being like, you guys need to go vegetarian, and then like you take a good look at his body and you're like, all right, no, sorry. It's hard to listen to somebody who has man tits. That's just me. How do you feel like a career, or how do you feel like being an athlete has prepared you for politics?
I think athletes have a huge opportunity to emerge as genuine, effective leaders in this time across the world. Partly because we were conditioned and trained and brought up in discipline, commitment, realistic self-evaluation based on results, teamwork, and problem solving, and that self-sacrifice. I mean, that's what you encompass when you're on a team. If you're a good teammate, and if your team ends up being any good. So I think a lot of athletes, even the solo athletes, they have to give up and sacrifice a lot to be able to compete at the level they do. The only problem is that most of our athletes are caught in a radical materialist worldview, and that professional sports and radical materialism have become one and the same. They become interchangeable. And so most of our athletes understand implicitly that to rise to the top of the field in professional sports, from a competitive aspect or a commercial aspect, you kind of have to go along with the radical material grift. And that means that you're signing an unspoken agreement to pursue your individual ambitions, but not speak about any of the issues that would disrupt the status quo. So,
And where did this change? Because remember, Michael Jordan would be like, well, he would say what, like, Republicans buy sneakers too? And how have things changed? It seems like he was definitely a good example of an athlete who wasn't really forced to pick a side politically. Did sports change, or is more of a symptom of globalism or corporatism taking over sports? Like, what happened and when did this happen?
well, Michael Jordan's a unique case because he was the NBA for a while. So his position was a bit different, and his upbringing was a bit different as well. He came up from a conservative family in North Carolina, and so I think at that time, a lot of Black people would have been right to criticize him, saying that Republicans buy sneakers too, because number one, when you're talking about social expectations of leaders, morals and ethics, the commercial should rarely come into it. And if it does come into it, it should come in down the trough. And Michael Jordan took a lot of flack from the Black community for saying Republicans buy sneakers too. At the time, Black people still didn't have a really good understanding of the Republican Party and what the political dynamic was. They were just disappointed that he used that line to get out of having to talk about bigger issues. And so, what I try and tell people today is, a lot of the wokeism has taken over professional sports. There's no doubt about it. And wokeism has taken over corporations, the corporate world, and the uniparty and the globalists and the anti-human transhumanists are all in on that train together. But don't be thinking that you want your sports and your politics to be separate, because the politics are never off and sports are politics. Okay. And it's always been that way, whether an athlete was standing at the podium and talking about politics or not. The same people who decide the policy in this country are the top 1% of lobbyists that own basketball teams or that are in elected official positions who do the deals to use taxpayer money to build arenas. I mean, so we can't be making any weird assumptions that we want our politics and sports to be separate. I think what most people want, and what people on the right have criticized, is that the left has dominated the sports and political conversation, and that because of that, the athletes haven't been fairly representing what's going on in the world, and they have a huge platform and ability to influence what people think. So we want the right athletes to talk about the honest politics in our sports, and then we could actually turn the country around.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I'm not super like, I'll watch occasionally. Like, my boyfriend likes the Yankees and I'll just watch it whenever he has it on. But I remember a lot hearing from like my guy friends and just like in general, people very upset. I think it was around the time after the George Floyd stuff, like
Yeah.
people were kneeling and they're like, oh, why do the politics have to get into our sports all of a sudden? So it's interesting to hear you say like, no, they've always been there, whether it's
Well,
been in your face.
I hate it. I hate that. And now that I'm on, because I came from the void. I was a nomad. I was the guy who told the NBA, you could keep your 100 million, you could keep your 500 million. I don't need it, because humanity has to make a decision about where we're going and who's going to lead. So keep the money. Most people in the country wouldn't do that, whether they're Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. That's the reality, because we live in a hyper radical material society. If you could name me 10 people who would turn down $100 million on principle, please show them to me, because I want to get together and work with these people. But so I came from the void, but now that I am on the conservative side in a political context, I hear that often, right? I hear people go and criticize, whether it was BLM, whether it was Colin Kaepernick, or whoever the case may be. And my contesting to that is something like, at least they were out there. Right. And not to affirm them or to say that their ideas were proper or logical or true, but to say that for people to recognize the opposition is going to be active. The opposition has beaten us with their activity, and they don't plan on stopping. Right. They are going to continue to use corporations, to Walt Disney, whatever they can in order to push their ideas and propaganda. So, again, it's like Well, what is sitting back and complaining of? Yes, Black Lives Matter. First of all, the NBA used black people in the same way the Democrat Party uses black people after George Floyd. We're going to say we care about black people as an institution in the most superficial way we can. And the way we do that is put Black Lives Matter on the court and put the names of Breonna Taylor, whoever on the jerseys. We're not going to talk about political lobbying or the Federal Reserve or our relationship with Wall Street, who sold out the American working class. None of those things are important. So yeah, they are running a scam, and people are right to be mad at the scam. But understand, the only two options are for us to go out into the streets with the same level of commitment and for us to build our own institutions. Who wants to do that? Nobody. They want to continue to watch the NBA but complain. I don't accept that.
It's not enough anymore just to keep saying like, oh, the left has control of the culture. Well, they figured it out. It's like, well, okay, you have to get involved. You have to at least try.
Yeah, no, the Republican Party has failed. This is not the liberal mindset is one of nihilism and radical materialism and reducing life down to suffering. And it becomes anti-human, and they're faithless. They don't believe in God. They're openly atheists and anti-God even. Not even that they're atheists, they're anti-God. And the conservatives in this country, by and large, Republicans, libertarians, they went along with it. They enjoyed the rise of the material high as well. And so they didn't provide the proper stop, the proper kickstand to drag the movement down, and we kind of just ran off to the left because everybody had their own thing they wanted to get off on and do. So the complaining thing to me is like I automatically, oh, you're in on it, right? I mean, how many and I'll give you this perfect example. After the George Floyd thing, I led these peaceful protests because I knew as a professional athlete who comes from the community, the neighborhood, the real neighborhood, not like the Don Lemon neighborhood.
The Hamptons, no.
Yeah, right. I come from a real neighborhood, and I knew that time and that event was going to be hijacked by the mainstream media. So I led these protests to counter that narrative, and I talked about corporatocracy. I marched us to the Federal Reserve. I marched us to the U.S. Bank Stadium, which was recently built with taxpayer dollars for the Minnesota Vikings. And I tried to help people understand that, these flame points, these inflection points of social chaos, like George Floyd, are a byproduct of choices made way far away from that day. And that the powers that be are not all culpable. I mean, they don't have total culpability, but they are very culpable in setting the stage for things like that to happen. And the police are a byproduct of corporatocracy, right? That the police are not innocent in it. They're not all guilty, but they are a byproduct of social decay as well, and institutional decay. And so when I did that, when I led these protests, people now will say, well, why'd you march with BLM from the conservative side? It's like, no, why weren't you out there? When the people took to the streets of your community, why did you stay in the house and hide? Why didn't you come out with your Bible? Why didn't you come out with the ministry of conservatism and republicanism and talk about what the genuine right-wing position was? Why were you afraid? We can't be afraid. I wasn't afraid. I went right into the belly of the beast with the Church of LGBTQ and said, this is not about liberal white women. This is about the state. This is about the authority and that we trust our government with. And when the Democrats are in charge, I'm going to be saying the exact same thing. And when they got in charge, they've shown they want to do the exact same thing, which is authoritarianism. But also a good example is the entire COVID debate. Who were the first people to reject the lockdowns?
Who?
The BLM. BLM.
True.
And
they're
so,
protesting. Yeah,
for us, we did. I mean, Governor Tim Walz here in Minnesota had an executive mandate and an executive order that we weren't allowed to be anywhere in public, and we brought 16,000 people to the Federal Reserve. And so I only use that example not to glorify what BLM did, but to show the lack of matching energy and commitment from a political and ideological standpoint from the conservative side. And so that's why I got into politics, because I said, if we're going to keep going this way, BLM and the liberal left is going to run off with the game. I can see it clearly from being a competitor. We're down 20. There's 2 minutes left, and you guys have not changed the pace of play.
I think the conservatives had a really hard time, I guess, kind of letting go of the idea of like, it was so firmly ingrained, like the support the police, support, firefighters, all that, like Blue Lives Matter, right? Thin blue line, like the flags, etc. The people. I just think it was very much like, well, we're divided up in teams, and you can't be for one thing and not the other. And I think it took a while before the real corruption of BLM surfaced. And then it was, I mean, easy for a lot of people to see, and a lot of people, it's very confusing though, because I think a lot of people still dismiss BLM. Maybe its initial goals have been completely washed away by all the corruption.
Well, I mean, BLM in its inception was a church of LGBTQ movement, and there are a preponderance of white liberal women running BLM at the grassroots community level, up into the universities, and even into BLM itself. And the whole thing is being funded by Nancy Pelosi and Congress. I mean, if you look at the most recent Ukraine bill, there's all these allocations of funds into humanitarian.
It's so sketchy, like millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's going to BLM. It's going to go to Planned Parenthood. It's going to go wherever they want it to go. Joe Biden got $5 billion to use at his discretion. He barely can stand
for diapers. Yeah,
this is nuts. So, but I want to create another framework for the listeners to try and show where America is, even for the right, because I'm not one of these conservative shills where I'm just going to, the left is run away with the country. No, they're running away with it, and it's probably our fault. We both traded in our freedoms for the security of the state, or for the state, let's say. On the right, we've traded in our freedom for security, and on the left, they've traded in their freedom for material high. And so both of us have traded in our freedoms just for different reasons. And so that's where the thin blue line and the blind support of police and first responders comes. And I tell people all the time, COVID showed us when the state goes tyrannical, the police are going to carry the marching orders. And I think now the real genuine populist America First movement has revisited their trust of the police, because they see with clarity. And that's the case across the world. Anytime a government has gone tyrannical, the police carry the marching orders. And at the moment where those police say, hey, I don't want to do this, I'm throwing down the badge, this is unconstitutional, they'll find somebody else to put a badge on.
Oof, right? Just like we saw with everybody who got fired for not taking the jab. It's like they really fired these people, and everyone who remains, same thing with the military. Everybody who remained are like the good little boys and girls who obey the state. Yeah.
So there's a referendum right now on the American people in 2022 and 2024 around all of these ideas. And I think the America First populist movement is the nationalist populist movement is the closest to getting it right in terms of potentially saving this country or turning it around. And the other people who are on the other places in the spectrum are a lot of times just missing it, whether it's the sanctity of life and Roe v. Wade, whether it's the blind faith in police and military. I mean, the Republican Party is dominated by neocons, okay, by war hawks. And the Ukraine conflict is the prime example. How many
Wasn't Mitch McConnell saying, like, with a straight face, the Ukraine war is the most important thing? And it's just like, how can you trust anybody ever? It's so frustrating.
It's funny how situations provide clarity for us at the best times. And I'm optimistic and hopeful about that, because I was having trouble, and I think the America First movement was having trouble distinguishing itself from the rest of the Republican Party. And I think the Ukraine war just did it. Unfortunately, I think there's a loud minority of people who are politically active who agree and have been brainwashed with the narrative that the Ukraine is the most important thing to America's interests right now. And it's like, guys, whenever you hear national interests around the world, I don't care if it's in Ukraine, wherever it is, the military is the interest. There is nothing there that we're protecting. The military itself is our interest in that place, and it's an excuse and justification for black funding, for invisible masked line items in House resolutions like they just did. And you got $190 million to the State Department and related agency. I mean, that's the CIA. The CIA gets $190 million for the Ukraine conflict. For what? For what? So they can go in and try and top. I mean, didn't we topple the Ukraine regime before? So we got money to topple them, and now we're going to go get taxpayer money to go clean it up or to fight Russia. And then when Russia decides to nuke Ukraine, then what are we going to? I mean, it's just a never-ending snowball of bad leadership and corruption. So,
yeah, that's for sure. And it's like, and if you speak out against it, well, you must be for Russia.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I'm not for Russia. I was accused of being a Putin apologist by
you were not rooting for Putin.
Well, here's the thing. I think we're in a 4-player jump ball between the free people of the world, the globalists, China and Russia. And China and Russia are unique in that they are ethno-national states. And China believes in the Chinese people as their religion. They believe they have the mandate from heaven. They believe China is the future of the world. Russia believes in the Russian identity. Putin's made it very clear. He believes in the Russian people. And he believes that those countries around Russia belong to Russia. The globalists, they're in it for world domination. So right now you have a fight between nationalist dictatorship and globalist dictatorship and international dictatorship. Right. And that's the war that's going on between NATO and Russia right now. And I'm not a particular fan of Putin. I listen to from what I can see that he says in interviews. I agree with some of the things that he said, especially regarding America and the way we've interacted in the world. But when it comes down to it, me and Putin would have disagreement because he believes in state censorship. Right. He believes that the government can censor the media in his country. And we as Americans have in a way justified his claim to censor his media and his people because our media has become so corrupt in a free market setting. So
exactly. And you have people dumping out, Stoli vodka and just kind of dumb virtue signaling.
What I'm saying is we have state censorship too. We just don't do it out in the open from the government.
Right.
Nancy Pelosi calls her lobbyists who work at CNN and in the media, and they come together and censor who they want to, or they silence or dim down or turn the volume down on who they want. That's still state censorship. It's just unofficial.
Exactly.
Putin's going around all the red tape and saying, hey, as the president, we ain't doing that. And I don't agree with either. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I like the basketball reference that it's a 4-person jump. I'm like, I can visualize that. Wow. We got a couple comments from the chat here from the last king of Norway. The far right is when they start to talk about the same things the far left talk about: segregation and race-based politics, one and the same. Very true. Fealty has one concern: if the vote numbers in November don't make sense, possibly due to reasons, where does the country and the world go from there? The WEF is clear on what they want, so shrug. Yeah, what can people do?
Yeah, I'll answer that one.
Okay.
I think people should participate in 2022 with the most with the biggest effort in American history. And, when you get cheated, it's more obvious when you do your part. If you don't do your part, it's not as obvious. So
they should make it look organic.
Make it as obvious as possible. And as an athlete, I understand this. There's sometimes where it feels like the refs are against you. Sometimes the refs actually do get to be against you. Maybe your coach pissed him off in the game or whatever the case may be. But, a ref or two has it in for you, whatever the case may be. The only objective thing you can do in that game at that time is play as hard as you possibly can. give everything you possibly have. So at the end, the people who watch the game say, they got fucked, right? they got cheated. And so I think what Dinesh D'Souza just released with 2,000 Mules is a great effort. I think the people who are continuing to speak out against or speak for election integrity, despite all of the censorship on that, are doing the best they can. And I think we need to come out and vote in as big a numbers as we possibly can in 2022, and see where things fall.
You can't, yeah, giving up is not an option, and you can't throw your hands up. That's the pussy way out, guys. Come on, don't get frustrated. Okay, this was a similar comment as before. I wonder if Royce thinks the election will not have any questionable happenings in the way that things happen. He's being very careful with his words.
It's definitely going to be questionable. But the great lie here is that the elections just started being questionable. The elections didn't start being questionable in 2020. They didn't start being questionable in 2016. And I think the Republican Party needs to get some clarity and some courage around that to say, hey, this election thing has been a problem for a long time. I think some are starting to do that. But then we'll have a better path forward for people to understand just how important it is for them to participate, but then also follow up in their communities around who they elect locally to write the laws around election integrity. I mean, your Secretary of State, and not just Democrat or Republican. Again, the first thing to combat this election fraud is to take down the uniparty, because the uniparty and the Republican uniparty candidates provide controlled opposition who in effect end up voting for the same laws that enable people to steal elections today and have for 25 years.
Yeah. 2020 is definitely not the beginning of shenanigans, but I think it has alerted a lot of new people to it. It's made it obvious to a lot of folks. Let's see, from Chaucerian. During the Obama administration, Vice President Biden told Putin to go make friends with China. We burned that bridge a long time ago. Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, the double cross and the triple cross is on. So it's not clear. I think the four players in the jump ball are having a fight for the split. But it's perfectly possible that Putin's in on it. I mean, who are we to say?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about powers and deals that are done with a lot of preemptive thought, a lot of premeditated thought, a lot of control on the outcomes, allocation of funds, the whole nine. So, maybe Putin's in on it. Maybe he waged the war and the two sides are in on it. And the real victims are the Ukrainian and Russian soldiers who lose their lives in the front lines of this conflict. Possible. I mean, but most politicians won't even say that. Most people in this country want to pick a side and they have to stay on that side. The uncertainty of the reality makes them uncomfortable and anxious. For me, I just go, well, I don't know Putin. So to me, he could be in on it too. So could she.
Yeah, you're staying open with shows, which is good. It lets people know that you can't be bought and you're not going to pick a side. You're going to stay open-minded. And yeah, who knows? It could have been like, Putin, you're going to cure COVID by starting this war with Ukraine. Go. Nobody will talk about COVID anymore. Okay, let's do this comment from Jeffrey. Royce, I salute you, sir. Bravo. A true American. The fight in the country is not white or black. It is not Republican or Democrat. It is the informed and the stupid. This is the clear divide in the USA.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Godspeed.
Okay, so let's see. August 9th is the primary. Yeah. Where can people go? What can people do if they want to help you? If they live near you, if they don't live near you? Are you looking for volunteers, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to our campaign website, it's roycewhite.us. You can sign up to volunteer there. You can sign up to, do calls, emails, social media. You can also donate if you're so inclined. And every small dollar amount helps. We are up against a number of third-party lobbying, fundraising, money laundering, scamming elites. And so, for example, the Democrat Party, the DFL here in Minnesota, at the quarterly had $2.2 million on hand. George Soros put up 250,000 himself. You can go look those line items up on the quarterlies. The Republican Party has $50,000 total. My campaign currently has more cash on hand than the entire Republican Party in Minnesota.
Wow.
So, we're fighting an uphill battle, but please go to the website and sign up if you can. Next Saturday, we'll actually be having our first town hall here in Minneapolis at the Convention Center, and that'll be streamed live on YouTube and Getter too, I believe, and probably Facebook as well. So it may get pulled down from Facebook in short order, but if you're in Minnesota or if you're in the neighboring area, you can come to Minneapolis next Saturday from 2 to 5 p.m. at the Convention Center, and we're going to have a 3-hour town hall about a lot of these issues.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good to know. And you also have the support of Mr. Steve Bannon, which is pretty impressive. How did you guys connect?
Steve and I have a mutual friend, Jeff Quatnitz, who is the co-owner of the Big Three and partner of Hollywood star Ice Cube. Used to work with Steve. He and Steve were partners in a venture before in the music business, I believe, or the music and acting business. And so I told Jeff, if he didn't, after I met Jeff and we had some conversations about politics, Bannon's name came up. Jeff goes, I know Steve well. I used to work with him. And I said, you got to connect us. And like 8 months had gone by and he hadn't done it. So finally I called Jeff up. I say, listen, if you don't introduce me to Steve, you and I are no longer friends. And within 24 hours it had happened, and me and Steve got to talk, and we talk regularly. He's a mentor of mine, a friend, an American hero, and the rest is history. So.
Oh, wow. What have you learned so far from him?
Well, Steve and I bounce ideas back and forth all the time. We talk often, I'll say that. And it's a constant assessment of what's going on in the world around us. But one thing that is clear is that nationalist populism has to be the future of this country. If we're going to save this country, if we're going to have a future, and a future where we're the America that we were set out to be in our founding values and beliefs. So we agree on nationalist populism, but we agree on a whole array of things. I got real love for Steve Bannon, and he's in the crosshairs of a congressional kangaroo court himself still, right? He's still dealing with the contempt charge from the whole January 6th ordeal, and it's just another sign of corrupt government tyranny. So I got Steve's back to the fullest, and I'm happy that he brought me into the populist movement and the MAGA movement. And people have to understand the MAGA movement is not about Donald Trump. He's the leader. He is the prominent figure. But this movement of nationalist populism is really about America being rooted in the fundamentals of individualism. And as an individual, we have the right to disagree with each other, and we have a right to disagree with particular parts of people's worldview and hash that out. That's what America was supposed to be. But the MAGA movement is something like, when we say make America great again, I told Steve the other day, I think we need to hone the message that to counter the left who says America was never great. There was a time in this country where we had a trade surplus, where we had where we were the manufacturing center of the world, where we produced, where our ingenuity and our technology was represented and reflected in our manufacturing output. And Nixon and Kissinger opened up China and sold us out in our manufacturing to China, and the rest of the world followed, because why wouldn't they? Everybody was in on the money train. And now we all live under the thumb of a corrupt authoritarian regime there with the CCP. So, make America great again. There was a time when America was great from a state standpoint as a nation. Now, were race issues in a different place then? Yes. But it wasn't that we needed to trade our manufacturing to improve race relations.
Right, exactly.
Right. So I think we're going to go through this change now where people start to separate these issues, understand them in their individual power and place, and go, no, we do need to bring our manufacturing home. And that is in no way synonymous with white people being racist towards Black people. And if we can deliver that message, I think you'll continue to see a huge Black exodus and Latino exodus from the Democrat plantation.
Yeah, I think we've already begun to see the start of it. Let me go to a couple of comments. Okay, what do you think of this one from Jamie Tom? I live in Minnesota. She won't be unseated except by a really good Democrat.
Yeah, no. I mean, well, we hope not, because here's the thing with the Democrats. The only people in the Democrat Party that are more towards the center are neoliberals. I mean, there's only uniparty and progressives on the left. And the common denominator on the left is that they're anti-God, or they want to modify God. They want to modify Christianity the same way they want to modify the Constitution. So if let's say I had run as a Democrat, I would have never gotten Democrat support.
Right.
There's no, and I say this about my primary opponent as well, and any of these GOP rhinos across the country, their plan is not to win over Democrats by becoming Democrats, because that won't work. No Democrat's going to vote for you as a Republican if you're pretending to be a Democrat. And if you really are a Democrat and you're just on the Republican side, then you're just an absolute fraud. I mean, that has no power. And that's part of the reason why we've lost the country. Now, the reality is a lot of the rhinos have tried to pretend to be Democrats just so that they could raise money and tell the people who do fundraising, I have a shot to win in a long shot race because I'm amenable to the left's ideas. And that's the great scam of this entire election campaign, fundraising, money laundering, cartel-like zeitgeist, right? And so, no, what we need to do is we need to go out and find the other 30% of people who don't vote, that believe in America, that believe in God, that believe in freedom, that believe in individualism. Because I think many of those people just don't believe in the voting process at all anymore.
Absolutely. They've thrown their hands up. They think it either doesn't count or nothing matters, or it's two sides of the same coin, controlled opposition everywhere,
We
or they're upset with the two-party system, right? They
gotta go get those people. We have to create a new party within a party that brings in new voter participation, and create a new party within a party with new voters. And they're out there. The numbers tell us they're out there. About 60% of the people in America vote. And so there's an entire 40%. If we could get another 20%, but it only happens through a genuine representation of the ideas. So.
Yeah, we don't have to go the Democrat way and rely on dead people to vote.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see one more here from XSL. Is Pelosi a puppet necessary to unseat Omar? Is a Pelosi puppet necessary to unseat
Well, again,
Omar?
Look, understand who Ilhan Omar is. She's an opportunist. She's on all sides. She's probably a national security state asset. She came out of war-torn Somalia. And like I said earlier, the people who got out of Somalia, a lot of them were national security state assets. So, she's playing on all sides. Listen, she wears the hijab like a traditional Islam practitioner, but she's pro-abortion and pro-gay marriage.
Yeah.
She's a fraud. So what that tells you is that she's being puppeted. And so if a Nancy Pelosi puppet pops up to take her out, you're going to get the same thing. She may not be as radical. She may not be as loud. She may not be as boisterous. But is that really a win? I like seeing my enemies that loud sometimes. I like that Ilhan Omar has made her positions that clear. I hate that nobody has stood up to contend and fight against them in any meaningful way. I think Lacey Johnson, who ran against Ilhan last time, is a good man. He's now the lieutenant governor for Mike Murphy's campaign in Minnesota. So I think he did a good job. But there's no soft way around this. And I said this yesterday on Twitter, Chrissie. We live in a country where people would rather their politicians lie to them than use profanity in public or on social media. Right. That tells us where we are. So, a Pelosi puppet would end up being just as bad as Ilhan.
Yeah. So she's definitely that's a really good point, that she wears the head thing, but she's pro-abortion. So it's like this, I don't know. She's establishment wrapped up in this kind of like diverse package, but it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
This is another one from XSL. Thank you. Trump had party, not principle support. True. But a lot of people really hated him too.
Yeah.
Okay. Joe Flink. Most importantly, vote in your primaries. It's hard to be enthused about primary elections, but politics start on the local level.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And for the Republicans too, the America First people out there, get into your BPOU. You know,
What's the BPOU?
Okay, so first people should go look up the Precinct Strategy by Dan Schultz. Okay, the Precinct Strategy shows people how the mechanism of Republican politics works at the grassroots level. And your BPOUs are like your local organized chapters of Republican delegates, basically. And, you know, these are the people who end up voting to endorse the candidates that come through the Republican pipeline. And listen, the outer bastion of the New World Order globalist agenda is the Republican Party. They're the outer wall. They're the outer rampart for this movement. And they are the ultimate controlled opposition. They pretended like they were trying to preserve or conserve, America's values. But really and truly, when the most pivotal moments came, like Roe v. Wade, they folded. They bent the knee. Same with China. Same with going off the gold standard, the welfare state, and many other things. They folded and bent the knee. So we have to drive grassroots participation into the BPOU so we can really change the inner workings of the Republican Party.
Yeah, that's a good point. What does Royce think about Biden's Ministry of Disinformation to police bad information online?
Well, this guy Biden is one of the most feckless tyrants that this country's ever seen. And when he laid out recently his categorization of what a domestic terrorist is, there were three main points: white nationals, who, or white supremacists, who they basically equate with Christianity, like the Washington Post did with me. I'm a darling of the far right, and my Christian conspiracy theory is what brings me into the fold. But it was also vaccine hesitancy, and it was also election skepticism, right? And so those three things are going to be the way that the state wages the state in, law enforcement institutions and government agencies, right? This is going to be the way that they single out and target American citizens as domestic terrorists. If you believe in Christianity, if you believe in election fraud, and if you believe in vaccine incompetence, then you are by definition a domestic terrorist. So this Ministry of Disinformation is just a high court to oversee, who the enemies of the state are. I'm sure I'm one. So great.
I know I'm one.
Yeah,
I was at January 6th doing man on the street interviews. So, all right, good. Let's see, the Chaucerian fraud. The elites have decided that they like the Chinese model, all those profits without all the freedom. We have been put on a managed decline for decades, 50 years of flat wages. Oh, how depressing.
I mean, yeah, the CCP, the telltale sign that our government and many of our elites have a lean towards totalitarianism is our economic allegiance and inner weaving with the CCP economy. Again, the precept of human rights and civil rights begins with the sanctity of life, but it also begins with freedom. And if we're going to be tied at the hip with the CCP, where they have a 2 million person concentration camp running, and genocide and forced abortions and probably organ harvesting and other dark, ugly, satanic things, how can we claim to be America, or how can we claim to believe in justice or freedom? The Chinese model, the hallmark of the Chinese model is totalitarianism, and not only totalitarianism, but totalitarianism by artificial intelligence. And they have the biggest surveillance system in China anywhere in the world, and they are prosecuting crimes by artificial intelligence and social credit score. And it's on its way to America if the conservatives don't step up and stop being cucks and shills for this progressive technology idea. It's out of control.
It really is, and it's definitely a scary thought. Whoo! Yeah, I saw this article the other day, like, they were, like, beating up AI machines in Hong Kong.
Yep.
I was just like, "Wow."
Yep.
And, just to see, like, remember during the pandemic, like, oh, everybody got together and different not factories, but, like, smaller businesses got together. "Oh, we can make hand sanitizer, like, we can make PPP," but it's like we don't see that same energy, for the baby formula shortages,
Yeah.
and it's just all the sanctions. It's clogging everything up. Okay. Let me see if there's any more interesting comments here in the chat. The US government double crosses everyone except the international bankers who are their bosses. Correct.
Right. The central banking cartel, who you can't even talk about, I guess. You know, I announced my campaign outside of the Federal Reserve here in town, and Star Tribune covered it. You can go look that article up, Star Tribune, and Royce White announces his candidacy for CD5. And they made the assertion that when I say globalism, it's a dog whistle for anti-Semitism. And I mean, that's just a telltale sign of where the mainstream media and the legacy media are on these things. You can't even. Oh, and also Joe Biden, one of Joe Biden's other characterizations or ways to identify a domestic terrorist is if they believe if they're anti-globalization.
Oh, God. How convenient. Yeah. Is this the article here from the Star Tribune? Ex-basketball player Royce White seeks a challenge.
Yep.
U.S. Oh, look at you in your winter hat. Look at it. Look at this far right darling.
Yeah. I think it's down somewhere in there. Go down a little bit more, maybe. No, that's the
comments.
Go up.
Globalism is the ambition to undermine the value of individual
citizens. Up there. There it is. If you go up a little bit, the term globalist has been used to promote anti-Semitic conspiracies of worldwide order.
Wow.
Yep. When later asked to clarify, White called any assertion that the term was rooted in anti-Semitism completely ridiculous. And that is my answer about globalism. If you don't know what globalism is the ambition to undermine the value of individual citizenship by an economic attack on the nation state. It has nothing to do with ethnicity or religion at all.
No, but they love to slap that anti-Semitic label on anybody.
Right. And my daughter has a Hebrew name, by the way. So,
wow.
They wouldn't have checked that, though, because, I mean, they can just call me whatever they want because they're the authority, the eye in the sky, and I'm just a little old black man who can't think for himself.
Oh, my God. Well, I wish you the best. I'm so excited to follow you along. We can definitely talk as it gets a little bit closer again to the primaries, August 9th, and then the day that people can vote. I should know. This is November
11th.
11th? Really? The 11th?
Yes.
That's my birthday. Okay, so I won't forget. Royce, where can people follow you other than going to your website, roycewhite.us, and on Twitter at highway_30?
Yeah, roycewhite.us. That's our campaign site again. You can also follow my Substack. I have all of my pieces on Substack are for free, and I talk about a lot of these issues. Getter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on True Social as well. Yeah. I'm on all the platforms for now until the Ministry of Disinformation brings down the axe on me. So I'm out there for now, but I'm mostly on Getter and Twitter, some on Instagram, and I've written a good number of pieces on Substack as well.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm getting more and more into Substack these days.
Yeah.
I'm getting into reading. Good for me. Royce, thank you so much for coming on. It was so great to talk to you. I know the chat really appreciates having smart guys that are patriots come on the show. Everybody follow Royce. I wish you the best of luck. I'll talk to you soon. And thank you everybody for watching. Adios. Bye.